of shares, preventing a return to 7,200. But the PSEI still unable to break past 7,400 despite gaining 0.3%. The main index closing the day at 7,367. This is foreign investors went back to buying mode for the first time in four sessions with purchases valued at $17.17 million. But Luis Limlingan of Regina Capital is still sensing that investors are still holding back. He told us earlier in the show that COVID concerns linger as well as inflation risks, despite print easing the past 2 months. Globally, though, it has been picking up. He still sees a Christmas rally happening with fundamentals sounding good still from economic data to lower infections, providing some support for the 7,200 level. Looking at our leaders and laggards for the day, you'd see here Wilcon is the day's biggest drag here, down by over 4%. San Miguel also in the red here, down 2.2%. However, we have our two telco giants here posting quite hefty gains today. PLDT is the day's winner, up 2.9%. Globe likewise ending the day in the positive territory, up by 2.4%. But unlike the two giants here, our third player, Dito CME, unable to ride that rally. This as it bled in the first 9 months of the year after consolidating the financials of Dito Telecommunity. The nationwide rollout forced the company's operating expenses to balloon to 1.75 billion pesos, resulting in an operating loss of 1.5 billion pesos. Overall, the telco firm reported a net loss of 2.8 billion pesos. Dito CME President Eric Alberto says their eyes are on the long term or long game, saying that despite being capital intensive, the milestones that they've managed to reach in the 9 months is encouraging. That includes signing up 4 million subscribers. As you can see in the chart right here, though, investors not cheering Dito here, down 1.5% to 5 pesos and 95 centavos a piece. With the acceleration of the digital adoption during the pandemic comes increasing online threats. While lenders may be continuously beefing up their systems, fraudsters are always on the lookout for ways to carry out their schemes. To talk more about that, we have on the show Ramon Hocson, Vice Chairperson of the Bankers Association of the Philippines and Chief Operating Officer over at BPI. Good afternoon, Sir Mon.
Good afternoon, Jess.
All right, thank you for joining us. Now, give us an idea first, just how much have scams risen over the course of the pandemic, BPI in particular. How many have you seen since 2020?
Well, over the course of the pandemic, Jess, as you know, all the reports have shown that digital adoption has increased. In fact, most of our clients here in BPI, we've seen a 100% increase of people using our online app. In that regard, also, we saw that the number of the physical stores were closed. We saw hyper-local stores taking off, meaning to say small businesses selling from their doorstep and accepting payments online. Thus, the usage of wallets, the usage of mobile apps for funds transfers increased. And during this time, from 2020 up to where we are now, we've seen the level of fraud increase indeed. And most of it are primarily around three vectors. The first one is around phishing, where via through social engineering, clients are inveigled to give up their personal information, confidential information, primarily their user IDs, their passwords, and so forth. The second form is via identity theft, where thieves have inserted themselves in the middle of email trails and assumed the identities of either suppliers or buyers, and in so doing, they redirect the payments to themselves. And then the third, which is targeting really small firms, we've also seen the increase of ransomware attacks. And this is not just in the Philippines, but if you take a look at globally, the same kind of statistics are reflected. In fact, in the US, the most highlighted ransomware attacks were primarily those that crippled the Colonial Pipeline sometime around June this year. And I think around January, February this year, there were also ransomware attacks targeting government offices in the
Mhm.
US. So we've seen similar attacks here in the US, in the Philippines,
Mhm.
and I guess to sum it up, with digital, as channels open up, as transactions become more convenient to do, it also opens up opportunities by which people can sort of disguise themselves and insert themselves in the value chain, and by so doing, they disintermediate the flow of funds and redirect it towards themselves.
Okay, just to better understand just how much scams have risen since the onset of the pandemic, you at least have a data or a figure as to how many cases have been reported over the course of the health crisis.
Okay, now just in the Philippines, there's no um, central way by which we collate the data. But from the Bankers Association of the Philippines, we do have a cyber security committee, and we do have a process by which we have reporting amongst the banks. Uh, the number of incidences have gone up by threefold since the pandemic. Where before we would have around, I guess in a month we would have around 200 300 clients who are scammed. We're now seeing close to around 900 a month to 1,000 a month.
Wow, that's a huge increase, and that has been pretty much consistent throughout the course of the pandemic. Or is it
Yes,
slowly waning?
it will continue to go up as digital adoption goes up. It's primarily because as usage increases, the volume also increases, and the absolute number will continue to rise. It's also because of the way that the criminals have been more sophisticated in their attacks. And most of these attacks are not just technological in nature, but they also include, if I may say, age-old methods of diversion. For example, phishing. Somebody calls you up in the middle of the night or unholy hours and then tells you, hey, your account has been compromised. We need your help now to lock your account, right? And the caller is so sophisticated and speaks well, very articulate. And some clients then are, inveigled to believe that it is indeed the
Mhm.
bank or another financial institution calling them, and then they, inadvertently divulge personal information. This can come in the form of giving their credit card information or giving the bank account
Mhm.
information.
Okay. Now, among the forms that you mentioned earlier, would you say that phishing is the most common form of a scam or method by which scammers carry out their fraudulent schemes?
Yes, Jess, you're correct. It's pretty much phishing. When you attack the digital chain, right? The digital chain, as I may call it. It used to be around 2015, 2014. They used to attack our ATMs. In
Mhm.
order to get money from the bank, they attack the bank. But the banks have since hardened their defenses, and banks have established or have installed and deployed what we call cybersecurity operations centers, where we essentially track all the movements within the bank. We've also put in more defenses such that it's harder to hack a bank. So the criminals now have shifted their focus into going after individuals,
Mhm.
because for getting an individual's personal information, let's say putting up a phishing site where you try to attract people and say that this is a legitimate site. They copy your site, they redirect it via emails or via advertisements, and then you go there and then you enter the information. It's easier for them to use that tactic rather than to continue brute forcing themselves in trying to
Mhm.
open up the bank's defenses.
Like what you mentioned earlier, fraudsters are now becoming more sophisticated. Sophisticated question now is how are banks doing, or what are banks doing to better enhance their systems against such rackets?
Okay, there are three things that we're currently doing, right? As I mentioned, on the part of the banks, we've installed very sophisticated systems to um, detect behavior or unusual behavior inside their system, such that we'll know if we're being hacked or if there are anomalies in our systems. But since 2015, what we've done also, we've added what we call the Cybersecurity Incident Database, where all the members of the Bankers Association of the Philippines share information about incidences, modus operandi, different tactics, and so on, such that if one detects something, if one bank detects something, or one bank is victimized, the other banks are forewarned. So it's an early
Mhm.
warning system for us. So we've done that on the bank side. Now for the client side, what we've done is we've installed systems to give them different levels of authentication when they do a transaction. So in order to complete a transaction, most banks have what we call multi-factor authentication, meaning to say, apart from your credentials, your user ID and password, we require that you input a one-time password, which is sent to your phone, or a mobile key, which is
Mhm.
generated from a one-time password generator, which is installed in your device, which is
Mhm.
registered with the bank. Now, all credit card transactions and all funds transfer transactions require this multi-factor authentication process. So, in addition to that, what the Bankers Association of the Philippines has done is to come up with what we call the Cyber Safe campaign. We
Okay.
started this in 2019, and it's in partnership with media companies like yours. Because for us, it's really about awareness. It's really about information campaigns, which inform clients about what to avoid, about what to divulge, about
Mhm.
what approaches they should be worried about in case somebody asks them for information.
Okay. Given that, how can the banking public better protect themselves?
Right? Just bottom line is this: digital is here to stay. And once you use digital, you're part. You're part of the system. You have to learn the nuances of using digital, including how to do authentication, including how to
Mhm.
protect yourself. For example, Jess, you're probably a Facebook user. So it's as simple as in Facebook, you set your settings so that your privacy settings will limit it to your friends, you limit the information that you give out, and so forth. Similar to banking, the apps that we have deployed have settings, so settings like, for example, you turn on biometric information so that any
Mhm.
transaction will be uh, authenticated against that. And then you make sure that any transaction that you do there's also another tip that I would give most of your audience out there. Since most of you buy online and probably use your credit cards, it's probably advisable to get an extension of your credit card which limits the exposure. As an example, and from my main credit card, I have taken, like BPI, issues out what we call an e-card, which is an extension of your credit card, but limits the exposure to, let's say,
Mhm.
10,000 pesos. So if you surf the net and then buy through the internet, if it's ever hacked, then your exposure is limited to 10,000 pesos. So there are simple things like
Mhm.
that we advise the public of. So continue to be alert, continue to be informed of all of the possible ways by which the bank can help you avoid scams.
All right. Now, give us an idea as well. I just want to know this particular point here. What's our track record when it comes to catching scammers?
Okay, our track record for catching scammers, we need help also, Jess, because in the Philippines, most of the users that we have using our banking, using our mobile apps, use mobile phones. And in the Philippines, phones up to now are not registered. So
Mm-hmm.
a number of the scammers use unregistered devices. That's why we in the Bankers Association of the Philippines are pushing for the registration, mandatory registration of mobile phones. And we are also in support of the government's deployment of the national ID, because if both of that can be established, then you at least you're assured that anybody who participates in the whole system is a trusted entity. Uh, at, at, at this time, we still have a lot of anonymized devices that
Mm-hmm.
participate in the system. It's very hard to track them in case a fraud is done. The second thing that we're doing, and this is very important, is we're working with Congress, especially with Congressman Juni Kua of the House Committee on Banks and Financial Institutions, and with Senator Grace Poe in the Senate, who has the counterpart committee also in the Senate. Because the current laws that we have on cybersecurity do not criminalize certain aspects of the act. As an example, the
Mm-hmm.
smishing is not defined. Okay, so when you catch somebody doing phishing, you bring him in front of the judge or prosecutor. You have a hard time trying to describe what the crime is all about. So the
Mm-hmm.
House bills that we are trying to push essentially states specifically that phishing is a social engineering tactic which by unauthorized means um, forces the person to give out his sensitive information. So it criminalizes the act. Okay. The second thing that we're doing is also to define that if you use your bank account or if you sell your bank account to criminal syndicates for them to use your bank account by which they can launch fraud, it's also a criminal act. In the Philippines, unlike other countries, we've seen the widespread use of people selling their unused bank accounts or their unused mobile numbers. Okay, what we're trying to do is to prevent that. In countries like Singapore, for example, it's a felony
Mm-hmm.
because when you register a bank account, it's only for that specific purpose and for your personal use. Okay, it's not to be used for any other means. So those are examples just that we're doing.
All right, definitely lots of updating to do when it comes to our laws and cybersecurity. But then again, we've made at least leaps and bounds when it comes to that. Thank you very much, Ramon Hocson, Vice Chair of the Bankers Association of the Philippines and Chief Operating Officer over at BPI. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Jess. Thank you for your time.
Here are other headlines we're keeping our eyes on. The central bank sees the economy growing by more than 6% this year, following the stronger than expected GDP figure in the third quarter. Earlier this year, the DBCC lowered its growth target to a range of 4 to 5% due to intermittent lockdowns. But now the BSP is confident that full year GDP could even exceed the 5 to 6% level, noting that the economy is on its way to full recovery from the pandemic. BSP Governor Ben Jokno also said that the country's economic output may even return to pre pandemic levels by the third quarter of next year, if not sooner. The Agriculture Department is considering imposing suggested retail prices for pork as higher demand continues to push prices up. Pork prices climbed by 20 to 40 pesos a kilo from a month ago, affecting both consumers and retailers. With this, the DA is eyeing an SRP scheme on pork, and the decision on the SRP is expected to be released within the week. However, the agency has yet to decide whether the SRP will cover both domestic and imported pork. Meanwhile, the Samahang Industria and Agricultura believes there's no need for an SRP as there are imported pork supplies intended to bring down prices. The DA admits that some imported pork are still stocked in cold storage, but they say these supplies will reach the market soon. Now, Philippine Airlines is ramping up its international and domestic flights as it expects a surge in travel demand amid lowering COVID 19 restrictions. PAL reports that it is now operating an average of 120 flights a day, representing 40% of the airline's pre pandemic regular flight frequencies. PAL says it also continues to build up its flight route network and that it's working closely with the government for further easing of travel restrictions. PAL says it has also resumed regular weekly flights to more international destinations like Los Angeles, San Francisco, Toronto, Singapore, and Jakarta, among others. And those are the biggest stories this trading day, November 16, 2021. Catch Business World live again tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. for the market open and 3:15 p.m. for the market close. I'm Jess De Los Santos. We are One News. Mask on, wash hands, and stay safe, Philippines.